Welcome, everyone. Come on into the room. We'll get started in just a couple moments as people make their way into the room. Hi, Dr. Phillips.
Hi. Nice to meet you in person.
You too. Welcome to Sean.
Hi, Sean.
I'm putting 2 links into the chat. The first is just our attendance, and then the second one is just a flyer about the rest of the series, so you know what's coming up. We'll get just a couple more minutes for people to come on into the room. I understand sometimes what happens is they're waiting at that screen, and when it switches to time, they get booted out. Yeah.
But to Sean, if you are an audience of one tonight, I'm going to give you my best. So just so you know.
Perfect.
Be like doing a stand-up routine to an empty audience. I'm prepared, though.
Sometimes it seems like it's just the recordings that get the most views than the students actually hear when it's on air live. But it's hard with our busy schedules.
Yes.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. This webinar is now being recorded, so if you'd like to access the recording after the event, it will be shared on the Purdue Global Student Webinar calendar. There will also be a takeaway at the end of the webinar that includes any links we shared during the webinar, as well as a copy of the slide content. So welcome again to Creativity and Wellness, tonight's webinar hosted by the Learning for Success Center. Tonight's the third session of our 4-part mental health awareness webinar series, and we are delighted that you've joined us. Our presenter tonight is Dr. Lisa Phillips, a full-time adjunct professor in the graduate psychology department. Dr. Phillips is a licensed clinical psychologist and a doctoral level behavioral analysis with expertise in business consulting, leadership development, and family services across the lifespan. We're so honored that she has volunteered to share her time and energy and expertise with us tonight. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to her now.
Well, to Sean, you get to be the first to know that as of Sunday, I am now full-time faculty in the graduate department. So I'm super excited about that and happy to share. I'm no longer an adjunct, so I'm very, very, thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be part of the Purdue family. Yeah, it's so thrilling. Okay, we're ready for the first slide. So the learning outcomes that I would like you to have as takeaways here is understanding the history and the leaders in positive psychology. And one of the reasons why I think positive psychology is so important is because mental health has become this mushrooming field with so many different practitioners, so many different therapies, that sometimes the focus on positive psychology and well-being and creativity and the arts gets lost. So I think it's important to understand that that aspect of psychology, I personally think, is just as vital as the work we do to help people level up and, live their best lives. So you will also learn how to identify the positive impacts of psychology and positive psychology, the way in which it fosters creativity and growth. And I think that if you are devoted to growth and awareness and change, as you continue along that path, it is a path of wellness. And then finally, to examine how to prioritize wellness through your self-care, creativity, and also some of the tools that we use in positive psychology. Next slide. So what is positive psychology? Positive psychology has been known by many different names and has many different definitions, but the things that have always stood out for me is that it's a scientific study of the strengths and virtues that enable individuals and communities to thrive. And so a lot of times positive psychology gets associated with just feel good or, self-help books, but it's actually a rigorous science that's designed to help you achieve your most fulfilling life. Positive psychology is scientific because it studies the strengths and virtues that enable us not only to thrive, but the field is founded on the belief that people want to lead meaningful and fulfilling lives, and to cultivate what is best within themselves, they have to enhance their experiences of love, work, and play. And a lot of times in the field of psychology, you don't hear enough attention, I think, being given to those very areas. Next slide. Okay, thank you. Anticipating. Just wanted to say a couple of things about the influences. Positive psychology, just before I just hit into the influences, I wanted to say that it operates from a strengths-based model. In other words, we don't start with what are the deficits that we have. I mean, most of us are experts on what we can't do well and where we fall short. But being an expert in what your strengths are, where your natural talents lie, what comes effortlessly to you. Like, I have people in my family that are pro golfers, and from the minute they picked up that golf club, boy, they had a perfect swing. Me, I was like swinging, the ball stayed there, but my club was out on the green. You know what I mean? I did not have a perfect golf swing. So most of us are so familiar with what we can do, but what natural gifts do you have? It does not operate, positive psychology does not operate on a pathology model. It's kind of like if you take a personality screener, like an MMPI. The MMPI, I always make a joke and say, if Mother Teresa took the MMPI, she'd come out like a criminal, right? You guys know who Mother Teresa is. She would look like a criminal, right? Because it's a pathology seeking test. The MMPI, it, like, anybody could take it and it will just find what's wrong with you. So positive psychology also examines weaknesses, but builds on them and maximizes what your human strengths are. And we all have human strengths. we all have strengths as people. And I think, like, a good balanced person who is devoted to wellness, who's living their best creative life, is someone who knows equally what they do well and also where they need to improve. I think a nice balance of that is what the goal should be. Positive psychology also emphasizes the positive side of human behavior, acts of kindness, being thoughtful, being a good gift giver. Are you like somebody who naturally reds up your house? I'm from Western Pennsylvania, so I just said reds up. Cleans up your house, just on a regular basis, or you're very fast at doing dishes and ordering things. It's focusing on developing meaning and fulfillment and positive emotion and connections. Like, are you surrounded by people who bring out the best in you? And that's a question, like, I think we don't ask ourselves enough about. Sometimes we've had the same friendship. Like, I have peer groups from, like pre-K and from kindergarten all the way on, then your junior high school friends, high school, college, graduate school, all these groups of people. And you wonder, like, because they've been your friends all along, do you still feel good around these people? Like, these are questions I think we don't often ask ourselves. The idea that people can become healthier and happier by bolstering and using their inherent strengths is what's central to positive psychology. And some people do not bring out your inherent strengths. And I always say, you should save that for your family, right? So sometimes our family members, when we're around all your big extended family, I don't know about you guys, but they don't always bring out the best in me. So I think, like, you can't pick your family, right? But you can pick your surroundings, your work friends, and all of those kinds of things. And I think we have to be real strategic about that, because you would be surprised how many of us surround ourselves by people who bring out the worst in us, who don't make us feel good about ourselves. And we are in these long established relationships and not knowing how it is that we move forward. Positive psychology actually looks at the experiences of positive individual traits in the institutions that facilitate that development. So I think that when we look at those kinds of things, it's like a movement from what's wrong to what's strong. Okay. Like we want to go to what's strong. We want to look at things that bolster, like when, in order to be creative, you have to have time. You have to be able to do things in a certain kind of a way so that you are looking at things through fresh lenses. But if you are frustrated and around people who bring out the worst in you and you feel stressed and tense all the time, it is very, very difficult to be able to then, like sit down and focus on wellness and creativity or calmly read a book. I always like to say this about when I talk about wellness and creativity. They did a study in England, and they actually found, and this was so shocking to me, but if adults who read just 6 minutes a day have greater stress reduction in their life than as if they were then listening to music, going for a walk, having your most comforting warm beverage, all of that. And I was like, oh my gosh, because for me, it's music. I'm a JoJo dancer. I love music and I love to get my dance on, right? And I said, I'm an aging club chickie from back in the day. And so I think like, oh my gosh, reading has that kind of power. But I want to add a caveat to that. It's reading that is not like the newspaper or or news or self-help. It's more like novels and things that help you escape from what your everyday circumstances are. So when we look at the history of positive psychology prior to World War II, right, we started looking at curing mental illness, making people's lives more productive and fulfilling, and identifying and nurturing talent. So prior to the war and people coming back with all of this trauma and tragedy and these unnatural stressors, psychology actually started out wanting to figure out what happiness was, what contentment was, what living your best life actually was. And so some of those kinds of things fell by the wayside when we started like dealing with the fallout when people started coming back from war and they had such incredible post-traumatic stress. And to this day, the world is moving so fast. Like I am also an EMDR certified provider. So I treat trauma, but my area where I treat trauma is really with children. And you can't believe, to be 8 years old and, to have survived house fires and deaths of loved ones. And, it's not like just that, you can't go outside and play with dolls and, just live your natural life. So there's a real need for the psychology that works on healing, the brokenhearted and traumas, but it's not all there is to psychology. In the 1950s, we start moving to the more humanistic thinkers, your Carl Rogers, Eric Fromm, Maslow, and it was actually Abraham Maslow who did coin the term positive psychology, because most of when in the 50s, when he was doing his seminal thinking, most of psychology had turned to figure out a way to help these people who had suffered with such tremendous impairment. And then we move on and we see like throughout the 50s and we move on into modern day, Martin Seligman, he is most people who understand what positive psychology is realize he is the ultimate like Mac Daddy, right, of positive psychology. He knows absolutely. It was his thinking that really put it on the map. He was president of the APA. So that means he had the American Psychological Association. So that means that he had access to every psychologist in the United States. And he had the journal of the American Psychological Association to put forth his ideas that positive psychology matters. And then we see the first conference internationally in 2002, and then in 2009, the World Conference of Positive Psychology. And I always laugh because, as we go on and we think about these kinds of things, like it seems so natural that we have positive psychology now, but those pioneers in the field had to fight for psychology that was focused on things like, growth, awareness, and change, happiness, to not be taken as fluff by comparison to the people that were healing and working with schizophrenics and, people that were suffering with all manner of illness. Okay, next slide. So some key thinkers who were major players. So we have already talked about Martin Seligman, Dr. Seligman, and he really is the father of positive psychology. And his big term that you may be familiar with from your undergraduate is learned optimism. And he says it's just like a muscle that you build. You can learn to be optimistic. It's not a talent that comes for everybody. And I always laugh because I come from immigrant culture. My family, my parents were not, I didn't come from English speakers. They immigrated over here from Italy. And so I had a different culture. And so my grandmother, they had so much hardship when they came to this country. It was very difficult for them. So my grandmother was like, I loved her with all my heart, but she was like gloom and doom grandma, like my cousins or my aunts and uncles would get pregnant and start having kids. And instead of being like, oh, how wonderful to have a baby, my grandmother would say, you're never going to know heartache like when you have a child. And I still laugh when I think about that because, I've never heard anybody say anything but joy, when it comes to having a baby. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was my grandmother, just so naturally, she would have benefited from learned optimism. She could have learned that. And then here's this is my $5 award. And I have a little funny story to tell you about this, the joy of my life. This guy, his name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I like to call him Dr. Flow. He is the author of the book Flow and all of that, and we'll talk a little bit more of that later in the presentation. But he really started focusing on the pursuit of happiness. So that's my most impressive thing is I can say his name. But when I was getting my MBA at Purdue, we did a game based upon his book on flow. And we did this game, and at the very last day of class, he came on the video with the game producer. Yes, it is, Melinda. Thank you. He came on the game and we got to have a class and ask him questions. And it was like one of the highlights of my professional careers to be in a classroom with one of the heroes in the field. He just passed away several months ago. So, if you've never read the work of Flow or The Pursuit of Happiness, please look him up because you will not regret doing so. And then we have Christopher Peterson, and his idea was character strengths and virtues. So he looked at health and optimism. He really felt that the more optimistic you are, the greater your health would be because you're not focusing on all the things that could go wrong. And, a lot of times in psychology, we say the body follows the mind, right? So, you have the thought first and then the body kind of responds. So that was his thinking and research. And then Carol Dweck, she had the growth mindset. A lot of these people are excellent authors. Gilbert was stumbling on happiness. So these are all the kind of authors that you want to read if you want to understand more about positive psychology. Bandura, everybody is very familiar with him because he was the Bobo doll theory, social learning. You hit the Bobo doll down and it keeps coming back up. You hit it down, keeps coming back up. But he's also very well known for self-efficacy. I feel like self-efficacy is something that's vitally important in the field, and in the field when you want to look at wellness and creativity. You have to have a sense of self that you can move forward and that you can do some of these things. Like you have to have a, like, just almost like a sense of well-being that, like, yes, I can do it. I might not be the best at this, but I can certainly do it. And I always like to say that's how I started out with cooking. Everybody in my family was tremendous cooks, but I was academic and studious. And so I came to cooking a little later in life, but it didn't come as naturally to me. My grandmother and my aunts and mother, they cooked and they never measured a thing. Me, I have to measure everything exactly. Even when I'm making a meal, I have to measure it out like I'm baking, because I don't have that natural skill set. But still, I was able to acquire those skills with just a little bit of augmentation. And then we have Snyder, who has hope theory, and what an important role that hope plays in us reaching wellness goals and being more creative. You have to almost have a vision. It's like I always think hope it is lives in the mind like a vision. So when you're hoping after things or you're desiring things, it first gets planted like a thought that you have that you can see the outcome. And then finally, mostly everybody knows this from the movie, Philip Zimbardo, the Stanford Prison Experiment. Have you guys seen that movie? It's highly distressing that something like that was allowed to go on. Have you seen that? I think it's still on Netflix. And so, yeah, for those of us in mental health, this can be very, very, oh my gosh, Melinda, you have to take a look. It can be very distressing, but he talks about heroic imagination and Lucifer effects. And one of the things he says is, for me, is that people who do great acts of heroism, they think about it in advance. Like when it comes down to doing it, they'll watch movies where somebody's jumping in the water and rescuing a dog, or, and they think on these things so that when there's something heroic that sort of like, like arises in front of them, because they've rehearsed what they've seen in movies or read in books, they almost like react in a certain way so that they can follow it, because they've practiced that heroism in their own like imagination. Next slide. So this is what we want to talk about, the technical definitions for Are You Permalicious? And that means it's an acronym for a model of well-being and wellness that was put forth by Dr. Seligman. And so what he was saying is that there are these 5 important components and building blocks for well-being and happiness are positive emotions. You have to feel good. You have to do things, not just, and I say this to my students in the classroom all the time, not just when you have time, but daily. You have to include some things that make you feel good about yourself, just make you feel good, whether it's comedy, whether it's watching a little sitcom, whether it's reading a funny book, talking to a favorite friend. You have to include positive emotions in every day. And what I want to say to you about that is it has to be intentional. It can't just be like something like, oh, I'll do something. Like you have to almost be strategic and intentional. The next thing in the PERMA model is being engaged, right? Engagement. That means being completely absorbed by your activities. And that's what Dr. Flo, right? Dr. Csikszentmihalyi, that's what his book was about. He describes flow is that phenomena that happens when you're so caught up in something that you lose all sense of space or time. Have you ever been working on something like painting or doing like plants outside, or some activity that you do and you lose all sense of space or time? Like you forget to eat lunch, you forget the dog needs to go out, little things like that, that you're just, everything is working and ticking. That's what engagement means. It's almost like that sense of flow, that everything feels right and good and you're making this great project. Oh my gosh, Deshawn, that just made my heart sing right there. That literally made my heart sing. Do you see you write that? Yeah, it's like you're very engaged in your homework, you're captured by it. It makes a big difference. And then your relationships. being authentically connected to others, and authentic connection. Like people who, I always like to say, everybody could love the best in you, but you want to be in relationship with people who love the crusty parts of you, right? Like the hard, chewy outside of the bread. You know, everybody loves the soft little, we call it the mooly inside, like in the bread, the soft little, wonderful, hot, buttery taste of the inside of the bread. But you want someone who loves the crust of you. You when you're cranky, you when you have a headache and you're not quite yourself, right? Being authentically connected to people. And I always laugh because somebody who I always struck me as being authentically herself is Cher. You know, the Sunny from Sunny and Cher years ago. Like I always remember her being on talk shows when I was growing up and stuff. And I remember her saying, like, yeah, I just don't feel like having anybody over. So I canceled a party I was gonna have. And I was thinking, my family, we wouldn't cancel a party if somebody had their arm severed. The party would still go on. We'd super glue duct tape and still be entertaining, right? So it's that kind of stuff. Being authentically connected and able to be yourself. So the next thing is having meaning. Is what you do purposeful? Like, I am so delighted to be full-time faculty at Purdue because during the pandemic, this job was a lifesaver to me. It really was. Having a family, having my students. I was in my house, they were in their houses, we were safe, but I could connect with my students. Like, it was a life-saving experience to me to be involved with my students and the staff at Purdue. And it added so much purpose at a time when the world was just going crazy. So finding like what your purpose is. And right now, like to Sean, you're a student. Your purpose in doing that homework, like you're laying down success for your future. You're taking successful steps every time you do that. So I think that is like a wonderful purpose, adds a great purpose to your existence. And then finally, achievement, a sense of accomplishment and success. Everybody needs that. I feel that way when I make wedding soup. I feel like I mean, it's the equivalent of winning the Nobel Peace Prize in my kitchen. My family, my grandmother, my mom, they could make wedding soup in an afternoon. I make Italian wedding soup. It's a 4-day process. It takes hours to roll those tiny little meat. You guys know what Italian wedding soup is. You have to roll the tiny little meatballs, and first you have to make a chicken soup and roll little meatballs, and it's forever. Then you have to get escarole and clean it and cook it. It is, when I tell you, it's a process. Oh, thank you, Melinda. So when I do something like that, or I make a beautiful pie for somebody's birthday, if you guys haven't had, Tasha and Tashawn, if you guys haven't had wedding soup, I want you to promise me you're going to order it wherever you go in the future. So that kind of thing, like it's so delightful. When you can have a sense of accomplishment and you don't have to, oh my gosh, yes, Italian wedding soup. They have it at any kind of Italian restaurant. It is so delicious. I hope you guys like it. You have my email. You have to email me when you try it. When you look at these kinds of things about like feeling a sense of purpose and accomplishment, like you don't have to do all things. You can feel accomplishment for what you're doing. Sometimes when I put all my jewelry away for the night and I don't leave something sitting out on my dresser, I lay in bed and look up and I was like, I have done something today. I have brought it today. When my dresser is totally clear or all your clothes are hung up in your closet, I know I'm bringing it hard that day. So you have to really sort of right size what your accomplishments are so that you can focus in on the creative, wonderful aspects of life and also your well-being that like sort of, I like to say well-being is like the invisibility cloak in Harry Potter, right? Your sense of well-being, it should always be on you. You should and I always tell my students, like, when you're doing your work every Sunday in the classroom, I put these things called self-care Sundays up. And in those self-care Sundays, You got it, Tasha. That is 100% correct. Your dishwasher's loaded. Your kids are clean. You have had the best day. That's exactly how I feel. And people don't realize those little things, Mothers to the family. You're the first up in the morning and the last to bed at night, and all the millions of things you accomplish, and yet they don't feel like they've accomplished a lot. So I make my students do self-care Sunday. I submit little things for them, and they say, we take so much away from our kids from working and going to school, and I feel selfish. And I say, there's nothing selfish about self-care, right? There's nothing selfish about it. That's why, like on a plane, they tell the mothers and the parents, put the oxygen mask on yourself first so that you can help your kids. When you put wellness around you, like that invisibility cloak, you can start asking yourself questions like, is this life-giving to me or is it not? Those are the kinds of things you want to focus on. Is this life-giving? I had to look around my life to some of my friends who have been my friends all my days, and I'm like, is this life-giving? And I'll give you another little example about like accomplishments or being like true to yourself and looking at wellness. I am like super, well, I'm sure you can't tell this, but I'm super friendly and gregarious. And, I was the first female class president in my school. Like I, have always been very outgoing and talkative. But in my neighborhood, I don't neighbor. I have never been in one of my neighbors' houses. I'm friendly, I'm talkative, but I don't neighbor because in my world, I'm talking to people all day long. I deliver therapy. You know what I mean? I teach at night. I'm dealing with students, but I don't neighbor. And people are like, oh my gosh, you're so outgoing and friendly. But I don't neighbor because my whole life is about being outgoing. And when I come home, I am like a bear in hibernation. Shut the door, draw the blinds, give me some Netflix. You know what I mean? Like I have to find other ways. Like I can't be out, you know what I mean? You have to figure out what works for you and what makes your soul sing and what makes you happy. So like I said, nobody in my family believes it because everybody in my family is like big, they're in each other's houses and neighbors and, but I just don't neighbor because that's not part of what I need for my wellness. Yeah, Tasha. Yeah. And I mean, I just like sometimes I need my own space and time. So it makes a difference. Okay, next slide. So how do we cultivate wellness and creativity? How do we introduce these things into our lives so that they are more like top of mind for us, okay? Gratitude. I remember I was a kid and I remember Oprah Winfrey talking about gratitude like before anybody ever heard of it. Now, I was raised in an ethnic, in a religious tradition, and I heard about gratitude, but it came to through popular culture to me through Oprah. And she would say like, oh, I have a gratitude journal, and I'd write gratitude things, and I'd be like, a gratitude journal. And I remember I had little calendar sheets, like in one of those little flip funny calendars when you're young, and I would write on the back of the calendar flip sheets, I'd write something or one or two things that I was grateful for every day. That cultivates a sense of well-being. Identifying and using signature strengths, using them in new ways. Like I can make Martha Stewart's Pat Brise. It's like a French shortbread pastry dough. I make the best pie dough in the world. The funny thing is, I don't like pie dough. But mine is like buttery goodness. That's like a superpower I have to make that Pat Brise. It's like you'll have to look at it, Martha Stewart's recipe. But when I make that for people, for their birthdays or for someone in my family, and I see the joy on their face, oh my gosh, it inspires me. Cooking is very creative. That's one of the everyday creative things you can do, right? Identifying and engage in flow activities, Dr. Flow, like I told you, things that you lose yourself in. To Sean, doing your homework, thoroughly being present, enjoying it, making sure that you're fully attending to all of that is just a joyful experience. Practicing mindfulness meditation, prayer, self-compassion, and being your best. I always think like, I tell my students all the time, sometimes you always should bring your best, but sometimes you must know that your best is not going to be your best, right? Your very best some days is not your best. You might not feel well. You have a sick kid. You have a sick parent. Your dog has to go to the vet. You know what I mean? It's okay. As long as you're doing your best, you have to understand that some days your best is just not going to be the best you have, right? Self compassion. How many times do we forgive our loved ones? But when we make a mistake, oh my goodness, we get out the old cat of nine tails, beating ourselves with the cat of nine tails, right? Just filleting ourselves because we made a mistake. Practicing mindfulness and meditation. And I think a meditation that everybody can practice and do well with is silence. Like sitting in the school of silence, even for a minute. I can remember, like, I used to run a 200 staff community mental health center. And I remember the only place I ever had a second to myself was in a bathroom. I used to call it my prayer closet. I'd go in there for silence, just for a minute to be silent. And that silence in the midst of all that flurry of talking and information made such a big difference. So I want you to think about where you can squeeze these things in. And I always thought like, oh, I can't meditate because I always have 1,000 thoughts flying through my mind. And what I learned to do was when I would have thoughts that were going through my mind when I was trying to be quiet, I'd just say, oh, I'm thinking, and keep going, trying to still my mind again. Oh, I'm thinking right now, still my mind. I would just keep coming back to stilling my mind. Be still, right? And I stopped judging that my mind was active, and it became easier then to meditate. Cultivating forgiveness and searching for things that are sacred. Listen, I grew my first tomato, and I had to kneel down at my kitchen counter and almost weep because I was like, this is a holy moment. So, oh yes, absolutely. When I grew my first tomato, because I grew up with immigrants, and they gardened that we lived off the garden all year long. And so I knew how important it was. And when I grew my first tomato, it was literally a sacred experience for me. Random acts of kindness, doing things for other people. When you're in line at one of the, we just have Dunkin' Donuts in my town, but Dunkin' Donuts, and somebody pays for your coffee ahead of you, and you don't know it until you pull up to the window and they're gone. That is a joy unspeakable. And when that was done for me, I try to at least like once a month do that for somebody else. But I laugh because sometimes people tell funny stories. Like I said, I'll pay for whatever the car behind me's getting, and it'll be like a van full of little kids, and the bill will be like, $45 at McDonald's. Which, you got to be feeding 12 people to spend $45 at McDonald's. So I guess, you have to be careful with that sometimes. And then looking back at life. Oh my gosh, Tasha. No, I'm like, bring it on. It makes me so happy. Like I look homeless. Oh my gosh, I don't care how bad I'm looking. I'll take a Dunkin' Donuts coffee all day, every day. I'll be like, oh, sorry I'm looking so crappy today, but thank you. And then looking back at your life, finding 3 good things that you could think about in your life that really made a difference. Looking at your closed doors, things that didn't work out, relationships that did not work out, right? And realizing those closed doors were gifts and open doors. What doors open? Like if anybody would have told me I was a community mental health worker for over a decade, I ran that clinic. Like if anybody would have ever told me I'd be a full-time professor and tickled pink to be one, I would have never believed it a few years ago. I just really started teaching graduate school because I wanted to inspire my doctoral interns that they could have applied careers in the field and then also be academics. And that I just literally did it to inspire them. And then the students, I fell in love with them. they captured my heart, and I started calling this my joy job. And eventually I left my big job to follow my joy job. So, you just never know what's coming your way. Yeah, it truly is. Teaching's my joy job. Okay, next slide. So, positive psychology therapies, I wanted to just make you familiar with some of these acceptance based therapies, mindfulness based cognitive therapies. These are things that could help you really make forward movement. If you ever wanted to, if you were ever seeking therapy and you don't want to just heal pathology, but you actually want to, focus on contentment, happiness, how to live a more quality life, how to be of greater service in the world. I used to always train my leadership staff on being servant leaders. And I'd say the best kind of leaders serve. You want to be a servant leader. You don't want to be all about I'm in large and in charge and it's power and it's control. You want to the person at the highest end of the totem pole should be the biggest servant, right? So you want to think about stuff like that. Dialectical behavioral therapy. These are things that really help you form great connections with others. Acceptance and commitment therapy. Honestly, I work with autism kids and autism families, and I think they're some of the most hardworking families who have had some of the biggest challenges in their life to deal with. And this acceptance and commitment therapy has revolutionized families and other children in households where there are other children with autistic spectrum disorder. But my real big interest in research is that how could EMDR therapy, trauma therapy, help kids on the spectrum and their families? So once I get to that next level, that's going to be an area that I'm going to look into. And then REBT, rational emotive behavior therapy, and Albert Ellis, the unsung hero. So when you go, oh my gosh, they're so comforting, Tasha. And I don't know if you're aware, but they have all kind of workbooks and stuff on mindfulness. So, and I kind of like that because when somebody be like, we're going to do gentle eating now, let's practice mindfulness. I got one eyeball open watching everybody else. What's going on here? I can't pay attention. But when I bought a workbook myself, I'm like, oh, I can do it in the privacy of my own home, and I don't got to keep a hairy eyeball open, and you know what I mean? Yeah, that's a great idea. So they have really good workbooks on that you can really learn those powerful skills yourself. Okay, next slide. Creativity and growth. I think this is so important. If you are devoted, and I say this all the time, my students will be like, we know growth, awareness, and change. I say make it a devotion in your life because everything is always changing. You can't stop things from changing. I tell my little God babies, stop growing. Don't go to kindergarten yet. I'm not ready. I don't want them to grow up, but everything has forward movement. So creativity is a natural byproduct of growth. So when you think about that, how do you cultivate this wellness? How do you get creativity? It's a mindset that you first adopt, that you understand that things are always changing. Even, they can change for, in unexpected ways, in delightful ways. And I always tell people sometimes things change in ways on the surface that seem absolutely devastating, like the loss of a loved one. That's a very hard change to make it through, right? But even I have had patients who say out of the loss of a loved one has come things into their lives that have changed everything for them. So what can start out as a terrible tragedy at the end of the day could be something that ends up being magnificent and launches you into that next calling in your life. Next slide. The other thing about creativity is you have to be intentional with it. Just like I said about creating wellness, creating space for positive things, you have to be intentional about that. You have to go back. You have to start, using social labels of creativity. And if you look at the reference list I leave here, there is study after study after study of powerful resources on creativity and how people learn to be creative. You have to ask yourself, what is your first creative memory? What is your first creative memory? For me, when I was a kid, I used to take my grandma used to eat Rice Krispies, and I would cut out the back of her Rice Krispies, and I saw this picture of Toulouse-Lautrec, this French painter, when I was a kid, and I wanted an easel, and I would get this big thing and go outside, and I'd wear my little brownie hat to the side, and I would use my grandmother's like Baca cereal thing, and I made a palette, and I would fake paint outside because I didn't have paint. But I would use a little fake palette and I'd be painting, and my neighbors would come over to my grandparents' house and be like, "What are you doing?" I'd be like, "I'm painting." And they're like, "Oh, well," and it's so funny because what do you think I had after I was fake painting outside? What do you think all those neighbors did? I had paint coming out. There were paint every day on my grandfather's front porch. Everybody's like, "Well, get that kid some paint. She's fake painting outside." Yes. Oh my gosh, Tasha, I'm going to be using that in my next. That you were in flow. You were in flow right there, Tasha. I'm gonna use that in my next talk. Yes, that is so awesome. But you have to think back. What's your first creative memory? And what was so joyful to you about that? For me also is dancing, right? Shawnee, I hope you're typing your first creative memory. Even like dancing, and we were like funk and roll people, you know what I mean? My mother was like always had great taste, and you know what I mean? We were listening to Shaka Khan and Earth, Wind and Fire, and you know what I mean? We were dancers. Oh my gosh, Tashawn. Oh, I'm so tickled. Congratulations to you. Oh, I'm having a moment right now. That is so touching. Thank you so much. I literally that is just so touching to me. Oh, thank you for that. It means so much. Well, then you know how much I love my babies. I always say when I teach, you got another mama for 10 weeks, right? I'm the mama bear. I love my students with my whole heart. So thank you for saying that. And then also the use of social labeling. They have done studies that show when people say, "Oh, you're creative. You can figure a way out of that." Like just calling someone creative actually increases their creativity. And so when I have problems at the house or there's something going on, I have to remind myself, you're a natural creative. You can figure out a solution to this. You're creative. There's no problem with this. And I say that stuff to myself over and over again. So make sure you label that. For those of you who have children, make sure you tell them you're creative. You need to pick up these toys or get yourself ready before we go to the park today. You're creative. Let's figure out a way to do it fast, right? You know what I mean? Start reminding yourselves and others that you truly do have great creative potential and capacities. And I think a lot of times like people forget that there is so much tremendous untapped creativity in all of us. So I think it makes a big difference to start calling yourself that. And I remember like in the mirror in the morning, even like when you're brushing your teeth or something, I always look at myself, and I always would pray a blessing over all my family and my god kids. And I pray a blessing. And it occurred to me, like, I need to include myself in that. So in the morning, I remind myself, have a good day, and I offer my prayers for other people, and I ask to be of service and for, you know what I mean, to be a laborer in the field for where I'm called to be. And I want to thank Melinda because I got an email from her about doing this training months ago. I had no idea there was going to be a full-time faculty position available for me. I had no idea, but it was like a thrill for me for having because I really do believe in having a heart to serve. So I want to thank you, Melinda, because I felt called to a purpose to do this training with you. So it means a lot. Yeah, I really do feel called. So thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Okay, next slide. Prioritizing creativity, and this is one of the resources. Creativity, like communication skills, can be taught and learned. And the one thing, oh, thank you so much. The one thing that I can tell you is that every person who prioritizes creativity literally says that creativity is a muscle that can be built. Oh, it's so wonderful, Tasha. And you know what I mean? I don't think that's any accident. I really do believe we're called to a purpose. You know what I mean? You can't escape your destiny, right? You're called to a purpose. That's why we look at doors that closed and doors that open because, every day in life we get closer to, sometimes our purposes change when you're a student, when you're single, when you're a parent, you know what I mean? Our purpose changes during our lifetime and over the course of our lives. But it's so important to know that and to realize that with creativity, you can truly build that muscle. Yes, it's so true. And to fulfill that purpose. And you just have no idea how that's going to unfold. I can remember when I first got out of graduate school, I read this article and it was so weird. It's like you get little glimpses of what you're called to do. And you think it's totally not for you. And I remember I heard some religious person said, it's almost like the devil knows the plan for your life before you do and tries to spoil it. But I heard of this woman in San Francisco who said, I never wanted to be in autism, but that's where I landed. And I can remember as a young psychologist, I said, how awful. Oh my goodness. She didn't even want to do it. And that's where she landed. And where did Dr. Phillips land? In the world of autism. Right after I got my PhD and was a licensed clinical psychologist, I moved right into autism. Who knew? And yet when I read that story, I was like, that poor thing. So you never know what's coming your way. Okay, next slide. Growth. I always love this line, like a parental figure used to say to me all the time, don't despise small beginnings. Look for small beginnings, little ways to be creative, little ways. Like I'm creative when I find new ways to organize my drawers. When I found somebody recently got me from my home office and it was from back in the day when I first started working, a paper clip holder that was magnetic. And because we don't use paper so much anymore, paper clips aren't a thing like they were. But somebody found me a pink little magnetic paper clip holder, and that thing has revolutionized my desk. It's so pretty and it sits out there and it has all the paper clips. So it was a small beginning, but you know what I mean? It makes me happy every time I see it. Mindfulness and mind wandering. You know how you're always in trouble when you're a kid? I used to lay on the grass and stare at the sky. And my mother would always be like, what are you doing staring out into space? And I'd be like, I don't know. But let your mind wander. Do mindless things. Play Candy Crush or the things with the balls. I like to organize the little balls and colors and stuff. Do mindless things because when you're not thinking all the time, like take a nap, right? Thomas Edison said whenever he couldn't figure out a problem, he took a nap and he believed that it came to him in his sleep. He said, he used to say, the Lord brought it to me. George Washington Carver, he found 52 uses for the peanut, like hundreds of uses for the peanut. Again, through mind wandering. So don't be against mind wandering. Let yourself go. I love to read that. Naps count. And then creative and positive people. Surround yourself with people who are creative. That you go to your friend's house and all of a sudden all the books are out of the bookcases and she's painting flowers on the back of the bookcases. Or you go to someone's house and they have 1,000 parts all over the place. They're building new shelving. anything like that. Creative, positive people who think they can. I can tell you when I try to build shelving, I usually have to call a family member to come and help. I get all excited to start, but it's the finish and figuring out where those last things go that sometimes, foul me up. Okay, next slide. And then positive psychology, we're coming to the end here. Positive psychology and self-care. I can tell you humor and health are so highly correlated. I mean, you can laugh your way into wellness. There's been so many studies about people who have had cancer. They make them watch funny movies and they went into spontaneous remission. There are tons of people who did that. Bernie Siegel, I think, was one of the first authors who said, hey, humor helps heal the body. And so I love that because, my family, we love humor and everybody's funny. So we really value that. Joy and flow at work. And folks, I have to tell you this, if you don't love your job, find a job that you love. Find a job that you love. I love my job in community mental health, but I didn't like all the hours, right? It was 70 hours a week. And I wanted to find something else. And then also, you have to learn how to manage stress. There's not one human being alive right now that does not have to learn how to manage their own stress in order to have a sense of wellness and creativity. Next slide. Well, we've done it. We've got through everything. Thank you, guys. This was the best. This was the best seminar. I mean, you three are the bomb. And I appreciate your wonderful participation. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate. If you ever want to reach out to me, you have my email address. Please stay in touch. And especially you have to let me know about the wedding suit. So thank you so much. And I'm going to go off mic here and let Melinda close us out. Good night, you guys. Thank you for everything.
Thank you so much, Dr. Phillips. That was so informative. I feel like I learned so much and I feel so inspired to be creative right now and to just even think about the things I'm already doing more mindfully, more creatively, like with cooking, that it's something I love to do. But thinking of that, I think as a creative outlet is just so valuable and so helpful. So thank you so much. This was wonderful. I've put into the chat a couple of links. The first one is the webinar takeaway, which is all of the slides we covered tonight. I've also put in a link for our student wellness resources. We've got a lot of great stuff there to complement what Dr. Phillips was talking about tonight. Things about mindfulness, and all kinds of relationships, all kinds of great stuff there. So check that out. I also put in a link for our student assistance program. I know a lot of students don't even realize that there is a place here at Purdue, a number, you can talk to someone 24/7 if you need to work through something. So check that out. And then the last thing on there is just an exit survey. We love to get a little feedback from everyone and find out some times that worked well. So thank you all for coming. The end of these slides include some links to get back in touch with us, and I'll just end on this one that shows our lineup of coming speakers. So next week is our last webinar in the series, and it's Dr. Julie Poole presenting Transforming Obstacles into Opportunities. So I think it'll be a great follow-up to tonight's webinar. I just want to end again by thanking Dr. Phillips for sharing her time and energy. This was just such a wonderful presentation and so helpful. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate both of you, Tashawn and Tasha, for making the time tonight to come out to the webinar. I hope you'll check out the website and check out the other parts of our series next week, and then our meditation sessions that we're doing each Monday in this month. So thank you so much.
And stay in touch, you guys. Don't forget to let me know about your wedding soup experiences.
Yes, for sure. All right. Thank you all. I will stop the recording.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.